Recording.
Okay.
Tara na.
Yes.
Sige.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again. Ayan, andyan na si Mama Aika. Pero
Hello
naman
po.
kami, ma'am.
Yes po, putol-putol lang po.
Okay.
Apo.
Sige. So, si Aika, alam ko ano natin din to batch din natin to, diba? Group meet ko yan eh.
Yes po.
Parang last year pa yata. Last year pa.
Hindi.
2019?
First year. First year, sir. Ikaw at si Aika ang original na group mate ko. Kalimutan nyo na ako.
Hindi ko na maalala. Basta
Huwag mo sir, na medyo na. Sige. Sige, ang natin, kasi natapos na natin pala yung 201. Hindi pa naman natapos, tatapusin natin ngayon. Natapos natin yung first is yung saan na yun? Wait ha. The nature of reading. Tapos yung factors that affect reading, which is focusing on the reader. And now we will start sa factors that affect reading, text, and context. Exciting, charot. Kung na-excite ba, no? Teka muna, ilabas ko to. Sana yun. Ilabas ko para window lang yung i-share ko. Sige. Eto na siya, i-share ko. Ang kinuha ko lang ang ginamit ko lang na dito mostly is yung sa reading natin sa UPOU na
Reference.
Module. Ayan. So, saan na ba? Bakit? Wait ha. Teka muna, ilagay ko sa first page. Sige. Ayan. So, i-present ko na siya. So, factors that affect reading, text, and context. Ito yung So, we'll just go back sa I think this is from module 1, no? Yung sa sinabi ko kanina, schema theory. Yung theories of reading. Yung schema may yata si Sir Kim nito ay may input na. Alala ko, in-explain niya yung schema theory. So there are three important, crucial part in schema theory. First is yung script knowledge natin, linguistic study, and language of a text structure. So text and organizational skill, ito yung focus natin ngayon, yung third ng schema theory natin, the knowledge of text structure. So text and organizational structure, we have two kinds, the narrative and the expository. So the first one, sige, sa narrative, alam naman natin no kung ano yung narrative. So who can explain to us the structure theory and expository? Anybody?
Pass.
Narrative, sino ba? Expository and narrative. These are the two. Kung sinasabi natin yung narrative, ito yung stories, ito yung mostly non-fiction, something like that. Hindi, fiction pala. Fiction pala. Ito yung fiction. Yung expository, si Sir okay, go ahead, sir. O, diba? Sabi ko na sa inyo eh.
Okay po. Sa pagkakaalala ko po, yung sa narrative structure, we pertain it to the text organization in terms of text na ginagamit sa fiction, yung sa stories, yung may story grammar, yun yung naalala ko dun sa book. Story grammar means meron siyang elements ng isang fiction. If it is for stories, meron siyang theme, meron siyang meron siyang plot, ganoon. Not really linear yung structure niya, unlike sa expository. In the expository structure, it follows an outline pattern wherein there is a superordinate sentences or idea, then subordinate ideas. Ginagamit siya doon sa mga non-fiction texts tulad ng mga textbooks, yung ginagamit sa dyaryo, yung ganun. So actually the difference between the two is that yung pinaka mukha nila in terms sa pagsulat, yung sa text organization.
That is so true. 'Di ba? Sabi na sa inyo may maraming mga sister, maraming mga nalalaman.
Maraming baon si sir, oo.
'Di ba? Marami siyang baon. Oh, so yon tama yon. Yun yung pag-uusapan natin about sa text structure because kasi pag alam natin yung narrative at expository structures nila, madali lang yung i-analyze depending on what kind of text it is. So before we go to that expository muna, we will go back first sa external na organization of textbooks. Syempre, 'di ba? Ang sabi kasi dito, pag alam daw natin yung yung textbooks kasi pag alam natin daw yung as a reader pag alam natin yung yung text organization nila, malalaman natin kung saan tayo pupunta, anong expectation natin in those parts. So ganun yung nila. So ito yung 'di ba, alam natin yung front matter, yung organization. Syempre alam naman natin tong lahat, no. So hindi na tayo mag-ano to. But ang tawag nito is external organization of textbooks. And then the next one is ito na yung kasi hindi na ako mag-ano ditong sa external organization kasi alam naman natin to, no. Pero kasi ito lang yung natin, yung parang of course yung map. Pero ang talaga natin ngayon is the structure of narrative. So as explained by Sir Kim earlier, ito yung narration, ito yung text that narrates refers to text involve readers in series of images, events, dialogues, or their combination in order to entertain the readers and to get them to imagine. So, ayan. Ito yung sinasabi ni Sir Kim kanina. In our books module natin, tinatawag itong story grammar. Mostly sa universal literature, tinatawag nila itong plot elements. So, 'di ba, in literary elements, we have 5 elements: the characters, theme, setting, conflict, and yung nakalimutan ko?
Resolution.
Wala akong maalala dun.
Character, theme, setting, plot. Plot pala. So, ito pala yun. So, plot is one of the literary elements or story elements. So, ang plot elements, ito yung plot elements or plot is the, 'di ba, sequence of the main events of the story. So, from that, ang niya is yung plot elements na. So, ito na yung sinasabi ni Sir Kim kanina na ito yung tinatawag na story grammar. Kasi, ito yung hindi siya parallel na structure unlike sa expository nga. Pero ito yung niya, parang format niya. There is an exposition wherein you know the beginning of the story, the characters, introducing all of these 3 things, and then the rising action. These are the first, second, third event happen. The climax is where, of course, you know already na this one, diba? The turning point, falling action, and the resolution. So this is, in our book, this is what we call the story grammar. There's the setting, initiating event, internal response, attempt, consequence, reaction. And then ito yung niya, schematic representation of a story structure. So as you can see, this is not linear. 'Di ba? Ito yung one of the kasi literature kasi ako, so I'm familiar with this one. Tapos yung writing na coordinator, ang sinulat niya na graphic organizer for making a story plan is linear. So yung mga student ko na sila na tawag nito na nalito sila kasi sabi nila, teacher, why we should write a story that the graphic organizer is for essay. Yun yung reklamo. Grade 8 pa lang sila pero nireklamo na nila to. So nireklamo ko yun sa manager ko. So anyways,
doon pala yung mga yun eh.
Ha?
Wala, joke lang.
Actually, kasi inuulit-ulit ko kasi sa kanila ang story grammar na to, sir. Kaya sila, para pag very particular sila sa score nila. So, if they know that they are right, they will really argue. So yun, so sinasabi nila. Tapos
Matalino siguro.
yung mga matatalino talaga na uma-argue talaga sila, sir, kasi tinatalong nila lagi sa akin kung ganito, bakit ganito. So writing din kasi ako as well as literature, pero minor ko lang yung writing ko, tas yung literature talaga yung tinuturo ko. So it happens lang na ako yung naging teacher nila sa writing. Tapos yun, mali nga yung or organizational tawag nito, graphic organizer na binigay ng writing ng gumawa ng writing test. So anyways, that's the reason why it's very important for us teachers to know the differences of this kinds of structure, so that of course kapag mali naman nga yung binigay natin sa mga bata, buti na lang yung mga estudyante ko alam na yung graphic organizer ng
Aware
story
sila.
at saka sa essay, kasi nga iba na tinuro ko na yun sa kanila. How about yung hindi alam yung distinction ng dalawa, 'di ba? Mas nakakaawa sa mga bata yun. So anyways, yun yung sana to. So yeah, this is let's go back to teaching grammar. Sabi dito kung magtuturo daw tayo ng teaching grammar, simple lang naman ang sinasabi is, first is you ask questions, di ba? Ask questions that pertain specifically to story grammar category. So that's what we had earlier when we identify the plot elements. So we need to explicitly teach them the parts of the story grammar, and then directly teaching children about the story parts, defining, demonstrating, eliciting examples of story parts and their relationships. And having children do exercises such as sorting story parts into piles and scrambling disordered stories, completing flowcharts, having students retell stories. So what I did here, when I was hindi pa ako nag-UPOU that time, ang ginawa ko dito, kasi first to second year of teaching literature that time, ang ginawa ko sa kanila is, iba-ibang grupo din yung pinagagawa ko. Tapos, for example, yung sa isang grupo, ginawa kong puzzle, yung pinadrawing ko sila ng highlight ng each parts of the story ba. Tapos pinost nila yun sa board. Tapos isang grupo pina-identify nila kung in this picture what kind of story, which part of the story is in this picture. So something like that. Para they will really familiarize. They will really get to familiarize the story structure, the story grammar. So yun yung at least sabi ni dito, at least doon nasabi ko, okay, tama pala ang ginawa ko. So ganon, ito yung mga teaching story grammar. So may pa kayo, may dagdag kayo sa story grammar? Kung yung mamaya pag-uusapan naman natin, pero baka may dagdag lang kayo. Wala ba? Continue ako ha. Sige. So, yun yung sa story grammar, no? Yung sa narrative. Ito naman yung sa the structure of the expository text. So, exposition, again, as mentioned earlier, refers to the text written to explicitly explain or teach something. Their primary business is to tell, show, describe, or explain. So this is the top level structure. Ito lang yung most common top level structure. The content presentation of that is this one, of course, the most important ideas. Middle level, which is the subordinate information, the supporting ideas, and the bottom level here is the subordinate information details. So since I'm teaching writing, ang ginagawa ko, I also learned this technique sa estudyante ko rin na sa ibang school na private tutor ko ba. Sabi niya lang sa akin kasi nag-aaral siya sa Australian International School. So sabi niya, Teacher, may mga ako dito, may mga tuti ako from American International School, Australian International, ganun. Tapos ang school ko is Asian International School, which is bilingual. So marami akong tawag nito, I'm gathering information from those two schools to also make tawag nito, mga materials, instructional materials. So anyway, sabi nung tuti ko, pa lang to, grade 7 or grade 8, something like that. So sabi niya, teacher, I have, my teacher asked me to write a paragraph that will have the TEEL format. Sabi ko, what's TEEL format? Tapos bigla, kasi syempre di ko alam yun, no? Tapos bigla akong nag-search agad. Oo, teacher ako, tapos hindi ko alam yun. Yun pala, ito pala yung structure niya. Top level structure pala yun. T stands for topic sentence. E stands for explanation or elaboration. Another E stands for evidence or examples. And then the L is linking ideas, or we can also say conclusion. So that's the structure of the paragraph only. So when I teach essay, since when I started learning that, I already also implemented that to my students in my school. So it's very easy already, because I will just say to them na, okay, you will do the intro, body, and conclusion. So sa intro, may binabigay ako sa kanilang mga types of sentences. Tapos sa body, yun, binibigay ko yung TEL format. So body 1, TEL format. Body 2, TEL format. Ganun-ganun lang. So ito na yung inaano ko. So that's the reason why my students recognize what is the graphic organizer of an expository and a narrative. Kasi nga, magkaiba nga sila. Linear nga yung expository, while ang narrative is mostly concept map, spider web, yung parang ganun ba? Yung ganun. So, madali nilang matandaan pag, syempre, sinabi ni TG, di ba? Madali nilang matandaan pag meron tayong graphic organizer na binibigay sa kanila. So, types of top-level structure is the enumeration, time order, comparison and contrast, cause effect, problem, and solution. And so these are the signal words. So I will not elaborate in this one because I'm sure we already know all this. Ginagamit natin to sa mga essays natin. Sure. So analyzing top-level structure, it identify its overall pattern of organization. So we have to just look for the most. Meron bang Ay, may sumasali yata. Wait ha. Si Tanya. Okay.
Uy.
Andyan si Tanya. Hi, Tanya.
Dami natin ngayon, ha.
Tapos, ayan, ito yung analyzing top-level structure. One of the key is to identify its overall pattern of organization. Kasi yun nga yung pag nag-analyze tayo ng story, ng narrative, of course, the first thing that we need to do is to find what kind of genre is it. Like, what's the theme? Diba? Pag nag-analyze tayo ng expository, ito yung tandaan natin, is to identify the overall pattern of organization. Look for the most important idea in the passage. Study the content presentation for additional important ideas. So, that means you still go back to the TEL format. And then outline or diagram the relationships and sort out what is more or less important. Yun. So here are some suggestions of teaching the top-level structure. Teach the identification. Use real classroom task to teach organizational awareness. Use pattern guides to focus students' attention on the organization of context area. Relate writing activities to lessons on text structure. So you have to relate it so that at least you have to give visual example to your students and model or demonstrate the use of graphic organizers. Yun yung sinasabi ko kanina. So ito, wait ha.
Slideshow is intended to give you an
Ayan.
overview of
Diretso na yan. Hindi ko na ma-post pala.
theory, also known as transactional theory.
Ito pa yung hinahanap natin, yung Rosenblatt reader response theory.
Pahingin ng link
Bigay ko sa iyo lang link, sir.
I've included a
sa chat. Lagay mo sa chat.
for you.
Facebook chat.
I chose this graphic learning organizer for reasons I will mention on a later slide. While attending Barnard College as an undergrad, the Women's College at Columbia in New York City, Louise developed an intense interest in each reader's response to a given text. This led to her becoming a well-known reading theorist for her reader response theory. Her literacy views were influenced by John Dewey, and much of her research was based on his foundational work. Rosenblatt believed that the act of reading literature involves a transaction between the reader and the text. This is why her reader response theory is also referred to as transactional theory. She termed this transaction with text a relationship, while she referred to the meaning of text as the poem. Her theory further explained schemata theory because it relies on the differences and the amount and kinds of background schemata each student possesses. Constructivism, which also is based on the work of John Dewey, is a perspective on learning that explains the way in which readers integrate new knowledge with prior knowledge to comprehend text. The work of Rosenblatt helps us understand the ways in which everyone constructs meaning and interprets text during reading differently, based on personal schematas. Rosenblatt argued that the meaning or poem of any text relies on the reader's interaction with the text, not with the text itself. Therefore, all readers have individualized reading experiences. The transaction or relationship, as Rosenblatt sometimes referred, between the reader and the text is dramatically influenced by each reader's life experiences and prior knowledge. In Rosenblatt's opinion, each text transaction is a unique experience in which the reader and text continuously act upon each other. Thus, learning occurs naturally on an individual basis. In other words, text does not have the same meaning for every reader because each individual brings their own background knowledge, beliefs, and context to the transaction. For Rosenblatt, the poem resonated in importance above the reader.
Everybody, we're going to talk about
interaction because it was the meaning, and gaining meaning from text equals comprehension. With regards to classroom use, the purposes of reading informational text and reading literature are very different. According to Rosenblatt, there are two kinds of responses that all readers have to text. These lie on a continuum and are known as efferent responses and aesthetic responses. The efferent component focuses on reading for information and obtaining efferent responses from students. Efferent reading has a memorization element and pulls information out of the words. It is information such as character names, places, and events. The aesthetic component focuses on connecting with the text on an emotional level and eliciting connections between text and students' own lives. Most often, aesthetic reading occurs with literature works and describes how the text makes a reader feel. Teachers should incorporate both response types in the classroom because they provide for a full text transaction. Rosenblatt's reader response theory or transactional theory has had significant implications for classroom practice. As a result of her writings on reader response theory, it is now common for teachers to create follow-up or post-reading activities that encourage unique and individualized responses. Some examples of post-reading activities are literature response journals, literature groups, readers' theater, storytelling, bookmaking, story maps, story boxes, and story quilts. Brainstorming, webbing, or the KWL approach are classroom applications that can be utilized before and after reading to determine students' background knowledge on a topic. Thus, practicing the importance of individual schematas on the reader-text interaction. One popular activity based on Rosenblatt's reader response theory is often called making connections, in which students use 3 different types of connections during reading: text to self, text to text, and text to world. The foundational premise in all these activities is that the reader-text transaction comes together to create the poem. Comprehension is achieved.
Ayun. So that is the ending of the text structure. So before we continue for the remaining 2, we will just go back to our sharing time. Ano na?
Ay, ang dami pala natin ngayon, ano?
Yes!
Si Sir Richard.
May nawalang isa, oo, nawala si Sir.
Umalis siya, sayang.
Nangyari.
Meron pala siya. Sige, ano na yung any prepared questions about sa text structure?
Question?
Question or sharing?
Oh, sharing.
Siguro ako, yung sinabi dun sa presentation na we should prepare reading materials that would target both afferent and aesthetic kind of reading. Kasi as teachers, admittedly, especially sa level ko, we usually assign aesthetic reading. Ito yung sinabi ni Teacher Grace that I remember na children have difficulty reading expository text, looking for information sa isang article, sa isang non-literary na work kasi hindi sila nabibigyan ng background doon. So, yon, we have to rethink the text that we provide to our students kahit na sa mga maliliit pa kasi it's never too early for them to learn to be familiar with different kinds of text and to extract information doon sa text na i-represent nga natin. Saka, ang ganda ng presentation ni Ma'am Eden kasi naalala ko yung mga lessons ni Teacher Grace, bumabalik lahat na kapag may structure talaga, magiging madali sa estudyante. Kapag may binigay kang flow, if you're requiring them to write an essay, so it should have the basic structure that they would follow. Kasi you would think it would be natural, no? Pero as a teacher, have you come across a student na magaling siya magsulat pero yung organization is very problematic, no? So, maganda naman ideas niya pag nagsasalita siya pero pasulat mo, parang
ang ganda ng mga words na ginagamit niya.
Oo. Parang ako na lang kaya ang gumawa. Kasi pag, alisin mo siya, di ba? Parang, but why is it so difficult for you? Kasi nga, writing is quite different from speaking. So your organization is something that we have to teach explicitly to our students because it doesn't come naturally. Unlike speaking na pwede kang gumamit ng mga ibang
Impromptu eh.
Oo, mga para ma-augment yung communication nyo, may iba ka pang pwedeng gamitin. Pero pag sa written kasi, dapat gusto mong sabihin, since wala ka doon, dapat maayos na kalatag. So, that's my realization na ang question ko ngayon is how can I start teaching that to very young children? If possible na ba talaga sa kanilang pag-aralan yon or maybe talagang pang higher grades siya. So, yun ang question ko. And also my reflection on Ma'am Eden's sharing.
Yung sa akin naman, I was told that Sabi sa akin, metaphor yata, I don't know. Sabi sa akin, your writing is like a pizza. It's layered, but it's a big mess. So, instead of yeah,
Grabe
so
naman. Oo.
instead of pizza, sinabihan ako na dapat daw ay parang sandwich. So,
Aha.
it is layered, but every layer is organized by parang floor ng building. It's fixed. So magsisimula ka sa base, which is the sandwich. So ikwento mo muna lahat nung kailangan, yung character, yung place, at para may setup na. Tapos yung palaman, yung gitna. And then yung climax, yung pinaka-ibabaw ng sandwich. So remembering that, naituro sa akin yan when I was in patapos na ako ng elementary, and then nung high school ay inulit. So yeah, so like Ma'am Eden said, yung magulong magsulat, that was me. So when nung gumagawa tayo for what do you call that, for focus what is that, discussion groups or exchange whatever, ang tagal ko bago makapag-reply. I will look for someone that sa tingin ko I can answer, and then before I can answer, merong ibang naka-answer. Because when I laid out my notes, it makes sense to me, but when I read it to myself, it doesn't make sense. So I have to redo it and then send it. So yeah, and yung sabi mo nga, yung kapag when you speak, it's free flowing. You don't have to. It's impromptu. You don't need to plan. It just boom. But when you write, it is supposed to be laid out clearly because you have the time and you have the chance to do it. So yeah, siguro yun ang tanong ko. How is it? I'm not even sure if it is possible. How can you teach that idea to kids? Yun lang. I haven't tried it before.
Hi po, okay lang po ba to respond?
Yes.
So yung response ko po is threefold. Please bear with me. So first po, yung sa sinabi po ni Miss Ria about is it possible to teach younger kids yung story grammar? So sa experience ko po, I teach it as young as mga 6 years old po, and it is possible.
Wow.
So ang ginagawa ko po is I always use graphic organizers. Tapos, pati yung graphic organizers ko. Kasi if you're going to look online, there's actually so many options. So, for younger kids, namimili ako ng very simple, or actually, I made my own. Ano talaga, very simple talaga. So, what I did was, kapag sa Word, tapos gagamit ka ng, I think, smart shapes, is that what you call it? Tapos makakagawa ka ng mga graph. So usually what I do is, I just ask my student, very, very simple lang, kasi you have to remember this is for 6-year-old kids. So sa middle, nandun yung main idea, and then may arrow pataas, nandito yung title, and then arrow pakaliwa, nandun yung characters, arrow pa kanan, andun yung settings, and then arrow pababa, andun yung important details. So nakita ko, it does take some time for the students to understand it. Pero a lot of my students are actually visual learners and their memory is actually really good. So kapag ginamit mo repeatedly itong klase ng graphic organizer na to, sometimes may mga students ako na alam na nila, after we read, sabihin na nila, the title is, the characters are, so nagmamagaling na sila kami sa So it is possible na you just have to meet the child na saang level siya. So there are some times na may student ako, hindi niya pa alam yung ibig sabihin ng main idea. So dun sa middle, instead of the main idea, I'll just write the title. So depende sa'yo, babawasan mo na lang yung demands dun sa bata.
Yeah.
And then yung second one, in terms of the demands on the kid. So narrative is, ngayon nakikita natin, 'di ba, ang dami, may exposition, merong rising action, falling action, then resolution. Pero sa language development ng bata, the first they learn is actually saying one event story at a time. So yung mga typical na, Mommy, I fell. Hindi natin halata, pero that's actually storytelling. That's a narrative already. Tapos yung susunod doon is multiple events na wala masyadong causal relationship. It's just sequential relationship. So for example, pumunta ako sa school, umuwi ako ng bahay, naligo ako. Yun na yun. Tapos, yung susunod doon is causal relationship. So, pwede niya sabihin na yung, Mommy, I fell because my friend pushed me. Now, I'm angry with him. So, doon na natin makikita sa causal relationship yung start, yung beginning ng proper na story grammar. And then from there, tsaka na lang siya nadadagdagan. So yung narrative skills ng bata, it just becomes more and more sophisticated. Tapos last one. So you were talking about how speaking is different from reading and writing. So I feel, kasi ako sa experience ko, speaking is actually harder for my students compared to writing. So, feeling ko, baka kaya mukhang madali yung speaking for the children because usually we observe children speaking in conversation. So, hindi sila actually nagko-connected speech. So, for example, like, hindi katulad sa writing na you are required to write 5 sentences continuously, for example. Compared to two kids having a conversation, magsasalita yung isang bata, sasalita naman isa, magsasalita yung isa. So it's not actually continued speech from just one person. So yun, kaya mas mahirap ang writing sa mga nakita ko because the child is asked to continuously produce language. And then, kaya pumapasok yung hirap sa organization. Because alam nila how to bring out ideas in spurts. Pero hindi nila alam how to sequence and how to relate all of those ideas together. Yun po. Thank you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
actually.
Parang may umilaw sa, parang nga no. Hindi ko naisip yun.
Galing nga.
Oo. Nice.
Parang natapos na ni Mamay lahat ng discussion. Pwede na ba
sige, babay na. Sige na. Sige.
Oo nga. Next stage na daw tayo, sabi ni Mamayka.
Okay, next unit.
Pero actually, dagdag lang yun, konti kay Mike, i-affirm ko lang yung yung sabi ni Maika na na yung story, yung story grammar na pa isa-isa. Kasi pag magtuturo ako ng writing, especially kasi ang tinuturuan ko ng writing mostly grade 8. Kasi pag grade 9 to 12, literature na yun. So pag writing, sinasabi nila, Teacher, it's so difficult how to write a story kasi pinaparate ko sila ng story na 2,000 words. Ganun.
Ano ba naman yan?
Oo, sabi niya, hindi nga kami makarite ng 200 words, 2,000 words pa, sabi niya. Tapos yun na yung ginagawa ko yung sequence na for the first week, ito yung gagawin. Halimbawa, sinasabi ko sa kanila, ano yung ginawa mo in the morning? Ganon. So, naligo, it's a story na. Sabi ko sa kanya, sabihin nyo, from your house, anong ginawa mo sa morning, papunta ng school, anong mga nakikita mo pagdating ng school, anong mga ginawa mo, sinong unang nakita mo, story na yun. Tapos dito sa classroom natin, kayo yung bida, ako yung kontrabida, kasi ayaw nyo akong kausap. O, di ba? Ganon yung parang konti-konti. Na nila na, story pala yun, whatever we do in our life, story pala yun. Yun yung inaano ko sa mga bata. Hanggang sa, after na nun, the rest is like, dagdag na lang. For example, I clean the bathroom. Ganon. Tapos, sige, after na nun, you describe your bathroom na. Anong nakikita mo dun sa bathroom mo? So, unti-unti, hanggang sa, teacher, I wrote a 2,000 story, a word story. Ganon na sila. Masaya, diba? unti-unti lang, accumulated, ano nga yun, Micah? Accumulated, knowledge. Ayun,
Yes
gaya
po.
ng, atin. Okay, anybody else?
Si Tanya,
Add
Miss.
also po, sorry hindi
Go.
na po ako camera kasi nagbabantay po ako at may isa pa pong seminar
Sure,
sa
sure.
kabilang gilid.
Ba?
Sorry.
Multitasking.
Yeah, I agree with teacher Micah when he said about it's possible to teach younger kids text structure and the use of graphic organizer really helps. You don't have to really particularly um, teach kung ano yung pangalan ng text structure na yun, na is it a process or is it a cause and effect, ganyan. So for younger kids, what I usually do, pag tipong hindi naman matatandaan ng mga bata yung kung anong type ng text structure, and there is also difficulty in oral expression or language expression, I usually give options at the beginning, like, what do you see in this paragraph? Do you see a process of doing something, or can you see a list of something here? Or yon. So, ako yung nagbibigay ng options but not really telling them na yung text structure. Pag medyo, or hindi ko na ninename yung text structure. So, I also use the text structure to teach them how to summarize. So, for example, nagbasa sila ng paragraph about making pizza. So, do you see any process here? Is it, kasi usually ang mga kids, if you ask them, what is a paragraph about? They would just simply say, it's about pizza. Or sometimes, basahin yung title. Diba? So, just to teach them and be more aware also of the text structure, in a subtle way, yun nga, bibigyan ko sila ng option. Oh, it's about pizza. So, is it a process of making pizza, or do you see a list of ingredients for pizza there? Yun. So, usually recognize. And then, I also make use of graphic organizers for those. So, depende kung ano yung text structure. So, kung process, pwedeng step by step. Sorry, hindi ko nakita kanina yung presentation. So, hindi ko alam kung pinakita yung mga different kinds of graphic organizers for text structure. Ayan. Ayun. Sometimes I also pay attention to signal words for them to kung medyo aware na sila with the text structure, I also tell them to pay attention to the signal words para malaman din nila. But at the beginning, I teach them in isolation, and then I incorporate them to the whole process of, kasi usually, madalas na ginagamit ko towards the end is yung reciprocal teaching na. So, ino-incorporate ko na siya dun sa reciprocal teaching strategy, which is a strategy wherein you teach nga the kid how to visualize, to clarify, to predict, to ask questions, and then at the end, summarize. In-incorporate ko na siya doon. Now, when it comes to yung speaking and writing, magkaiba kasing task yun sa brain eh. And tama si Teacher Micah, sometimes magaling magsalita because it's conversation language skill. But when it comes to writing, it's a different brain task kung saan mag-organize ka pa. And so, we also use graphic organizers for teaching written expression. So, there are several naman, like 4 squares, where you teach the mnemonics of power, you plan, organize, you write, you edit, and then you rewrite yun. Isa-isa yun. And then, ang ginagawa ko, pinapa-construct ko muna sa kanila orally, usually per part. So, let's write the main idea. Sabihin mo muna, tapos i-write. Sometimes, minsan, kahit sinabi nila, iba din the way they write. The way they write it. So, may mga ibang issues na doon. Maybe the attention or yung recall ng words, nawawala na din. So, I think that the key when it comes to teaching written expression or writing a paragraph is you break it down talaga. Wag sabay isip, tapos write. Medyo mahirap eh. Medyo complex yung task. Tapos nagko-construct pa sila ng sentence and nag-organize. I think the best way is to really teach them the process. You plan first, you organize, and then once you organize, you plan, organize, and then you write na, and then you edit, and then later on you read it. If I could, wait lang, I could share to you one of the graphic organizers I use. Pero, I'll log in the other, wait lang po. Ay, sorry. Ito, create ko lang din siya. And you could actually, medyo toxic din siya ituro kasi ang haba. Pero I think it's the best way kung medyo struggling yung kids na gawin yung skills ng sabay-sabay. So I'll just join my other, paano ba yan? Ay, dapat yata hindi kasama to. Wait lang, sorry.
Feedback.
Kasi dalawa eh.
Dapat yung isa naka-mute.
Minute na nga dalawa. Okay, while waiting for Tanya, maano ko lang, yung tinuturo ko sa estudyante ko lang yung 5 steps of writing. Ayan na. Ayan nga. Writing
Power.
process.
Wow. Miss Tanya,
Ayan.
baka pwede mong i-share yan. Nako, may echo.
Sige, i-share ko sa inyo. Wait lang
I-send mo yung file.
Yes, I will send the file. So, break down ko pa siya some more. So, that's usually 1 or 2 steps per day. Magpa-plan kami. Minsan, pag sobrang talagang wala, sabaw yung estudyante, nagli-list of label muna kami. Tapos we'll group them together, then we'll organize them using the 4 square. But for some, we could start with the 4 square already. From the 4 square, we'll write them into sentences. We do the hamburger template. And then the next day would be edit, and then the following would be the rewrite. Yeah. So I could share this with you guys. Yun lang. Yun. So,
ayan, may may isa na tayong PowerPoint para sa klase natin.
Medyo mahaba lang siya, but yeah. But nevertheless, yeah. You could teach that also to younger kids. I think.
Miss Tanya, ipadala mo dun sa natin sa chat group sa QE review.
Yes, I'm sending it now na po.
Okay.
All right.
Excited.
I-upload ko din yung slide ko, sir, sa natin after. Isang slide lang to 3 subjects. So meron pa ba? Or proceed na tayo. Lang to, maiksi lang tong dalawang to, maiksi lang to. Okay. So sige, let's na. The second one is our readability. Sana si readability. Tama ba? Ayan. Ayan, so sa readability, of course, we know naman, di ba? Readability is a measure of how easy a piece of text is to read. The level of complexity of the text, its familiarity, legibility, and typography all feed into how readable your text is. It is the key factor in user experience. So, sinabi nga kanina ni ewan ko si Ria, sabi ni Ria, kung dapat teacher tayo, we know what kinds of text we should give to our students. But we have our own way of selecting this one. So we have to ask these questions. Does the content match my teaching objectives? Sabi nga ni Teacher Micah, siya yung gumagawa eh. Galing. So, ito yung mga at least 4 questions na itatanong natin sa sarili natin. Do my students have the background necessary for understanding the book? Are there enough examples to help my students learn the major concepts? And will my students find it interesting? So at least these are your kumbaga starter kit kung magtuturo na kayo ng any kinds of text, 'di ba? And there so after nun, you can add more questions once you meet all this one. So you can add more to the others. So in order for us to really know, especially for the higher levels, I think it's easier to choose books or text for the younger ones, no? But then it's very difficult when we have older students. I think that's the reason why we have this readability. So in order for us to do this, we know there are 3 things that we need to know. There are the aids for learning, content, and readability. So what are those things? We have the vocabulary that is either known or clearly explained, coherent sentences that help connect new information with prior information. Again, your schema. Aids which assist with questioning and review to hold the reader's attention. Ito yung sinasabi ni Tanya kanina na you have to elicit questions before you give your own idea, because you might not know. Students also will have their own answers that you could also learn. That's the reason why I also like to do the motivation and motivational questions that we had before, because yun yung may malalaman pa ako sa mga students ko, they have this kind of experience pala. So, mga gano'n na especially when I have like grade, kasi tinuturuan ko nga, di ba, grade 9 and to 12. So marami din silang experiences na pwede ding pagkakahugutan, di ba? So, ayun. At saka, pag ginagawa mo kasi yun, students will also get interested in listening to you, because they also know na you are also listening to them. Yun yung importante doon. You get their attention because you also got their attention. Something like that. It's a two-way what do you call that? Two-way street. So, ganon. So, length appropriate to course time limits. Of course, especially me, I have 45-minute class in a day lang, and the literature ang tinuturo ko, di ba, ang haba. So content expressed in terms of major concepts and principles with aesthetically pleasing examples and illustrations. So yun yung mga importanteng isipin natin when we are going to give our students any literary or any text to use for learning. So these are, we have in our module psychology in reading, we have 3 actually readability. First one is paragraph and smog grading, and then the other one is close. Doon nasaga kami dito yung mamaya. So ito yung sa readability. Readability formulas. This is just a very quick video. So let's hear it now. Wait a minute. Nakamute siya.
Ba't nakahiwala yung sound?
Advantages of using
Ayun.
readability formulas. Brought to you by www.readabilityformulas.com. Presently, there are over 200 readability formulas with different degrees of accuracy and success.
Wow.
For a list of popular readability formulas and their calculations, visit www.readabilityformulas.com. Many scholars debate about which readability formula is foolproof. All formulas have some significance in improving text readability. Here are some advantages of using readability formulas on your document. Number 1, by definition, readability formulas measure the grade level readers must have to read a given text. The results from using readability formulas provide the writer of the text with much needed information to reach his target audience. Number 2, readability formulas do not require the targeted readers to first go through the text to decide if the text is too hard or too easy to read. By using readability formulas, you can know ahead of time if your readers can understand your material. This saves you time and money. Number 3, readability formulas are text-based formulas. Many researchers and writers find them easy to use. Number 4, readability formulas help the text creators convert the document into plain language if the readability levels are low or too high. Number 5, using readability formulas to perfect a document can help readers to increase their retention, comprehension, and speed of reading. This, in turn, smoothens out the work schedule of your readers. And lastly, a readable text always attracts a larger reader base.
Ayun. So, ito yung kay Fry readability graph. And then, panoorin na lang natin tong video agad kasi it explains na.
Hey everybody, we're going to talk about calculating.
Wait.
Hey everybody, we're going to talk about calculating readability. So how do you know if the reading level of the text is reasonable for your student or for parents if you're sending information home to them? It is important that as a teacher of language arts or any other subject, really, if you are having students read, you should know if the text that they're reading is accessible. And certainly there are content issues to be aware of. Just students have background knowledge and understanding of the content that they're reading. But the word choice and the length of sentences, the complexity of the text itself, its readability can be measured. And I'm going to show you how to do this manually, how we used to do it old school. There are plenty of apps and other resources available to find out the readability, the grade level or Lexile level of the text that you're using. So you can use other tools, but I'm going to make sure that you know how to calculate readability without technology. We start by randomly selecting 300-word passages, and this is a little bit tedious. You do have to just simply count, out a section of words. You can use this. We do this with Word.
Wait, do you want to continue this video? Kasi ginawa naman natin na tong fry graph, no?
Pwede nating panoorin. For me, gusto kong panoorin ulit.
Sige.
Kasi, ewan ko yung iba.
To refresh, okay. Go ahead.
Word or other word tool to calculate the number of words that are involved. But you have to come up with 300-word passages for the accuracy of this readability measure. Selecting the sections randomly is helpful. If you always select the beginning of a chapter, if you always select the middle, it does skew things. Usually the beginning of a chapter is a little bit lower readability than other sections of a book, but just make sure that you're selecting 3 random 100-word passages. You count then the number of sentences in each of those 100-word passages, and then you count the number of syllables in the 100-word passages. You plot that information on either the grade level or the age level graphs, which I'll show you in a minute, and determine which band the 3 samples fall into. So let's walk through that. be aware that this is not a full sample. This is just an example, and I wanted it to be large enough on the slide for you to be able to read it. So I've counted out a passage, assumably 100 words. This one is actually only 50. But my first step is to determine, okay, how many sentences are there? And so if we look, we see a period after doctor, we see another after children, after girl, after child, after unsettling, after before, and then we get to part of a sentence. We don't even have a full sentence there. So you would count up those sentences. And we'll say it's about 7.25. Then, after you've counted sentences, you're going to count syllables. Now, counting out the syllables is a significant issue because we know that we've counted already 100 words. And so we're automatically going to have at least 100 syllables. You can't have a word that is less than one syllable. And anytime you're tallying and marking over 100 of something, the likelihood of making an error is high. So I have a little trick for you. We're only going to mark the words that have more than one syllable. So Chris Moore is a doctor. Doctor is 2 syllables. Chris Moore is and are all single syllables. So doctor gets a tally because it has 2 syllables. He performs, again, a 2-syllable word gets 1 tally. And then operations, 4-syllable word. We assume 1 syllable, it gets 3 tallies over the top. So you keep going through that until all of the words have been tallied. The one thing to note, numbers usually are not included. So if you have a date like 1999, you would not include the syllable count of that. You would just skip it. If you're reading a passage that has significant numbers, you may want to choose a different passage. So in this, assuming if I counted up all of those tallies, we already know there's 100. So we do 100 plus my 30 tallies equals 130 syllables in this section. Now we use the Fry graph. And one of the graphs is for grade level, the other is for age level. You'll just have to determine which you prefer for that. Most teachers like to use grade level, but you're certainly able to use the age graph if that's what you prefer. So let's say that we had the following data from our samples. We had 4.5 sentences with 116 syllables, 5 sentences with 122 syllables, or 4.8 sentences with 123 syllables. We would plot those out like this. And we're lucky enough that they're all lining up pretty nicely. So all right there along the line between 6th and 7th grade, right? So the 6th to 7th grade text has, as you can see, longer sentences. It's closer here to this side of the line. This line is a barrier here between longer words or longer sentences. The passage we're having students read has longer sentences, and they're all right about late 6th grade, beginning of 7th grade. So we could say this passage was late 6th grade, early 7th grade. So are there easier ways? Absolutely. Microsoft Word used to have some directions. I'm not even certain that these are still accurate. But in their tools section and options, they had some spelling and grammar tools that would allow you to show the readability statistics. There are, I know, certainly apps and free websites where you can just import your text. You can cut and paste it in, and it will tell you the readability level. All of these have slightly different scales that they're dealing with, but still, it does give you a sense of what is the reading level of this material, and do I think my students could take that in? Would it be accessible to them? That's what I have for you on readability. If you have questions, would you please let me know? Have a great day.
All right. So yun na
Hey
yung...
everybody, we're going to talk.
Ay, ano ba yun? Okay. So yun na yung Fry will explain Fry graph. And the next one we have smog readability formula, which is based on words naman to with 3 or more syllables. 'Di ba ang Fry is based on from 2 syllables. So ang itong smog is 3 or more syllables formula. So meron na din itong yun nga, may mga apps na ngayon to know the readability as what mentioned earlier. So yun, at saka ito yung sinasabi ko na yung close procedure. Ito yung is a technique for omitting words from a passage so that the reader is forced to use background experience, knowledge, syntax, vocabulary interest, and generally higher order thinking skills to fill in the blank and complete the thought. Okay, so itong close procedure talaga, yung hindi ko makomplete na test. Sabi ko, ang bobo ko naman sa vocabulary. Kaya ganun ako pag nag-aano ako ng close procedure. So yon, ito yung sa readability. So what can you say? What can you say about it before we will go to the last part? May mga ano kayo sa readability? Mga experience or nagamit nyo ba to? Or usually kasi ang alam ko, nagamit ko itong readability nung maliban sa pinagawa tayo ng readability ni TG ba yun? Nagamit ko siya nung tinest ko yung book namin, pinagawa ako nung analysis nga kasi maraming nagrereklamo na mga teachers namin na yung ginagamit daw naming book is yung mga words are very difficult and it's not really nila.
When you say namin na kayo ng mga foreigners o namin na kayo lahat na teachers all in all?
All in all, lahat talaga ng teachers ng literature, sinabi talaga nila. Even yung mga native speakers, sabi ng mga native speakers namin, sabi nila
high school level or college level.
Sabi na, even me, I don't use normally all these words that are in the book. So, yun, gumawa ako. Buti na lang at nag-aaral na ako that time. So, alam ko paano gawin itong Kasi kung
anong book? Bigay ka naman na example.
Yung ang ginagamit kasi namin literature, spotlight on literature. Ito yung kasi yung mga story naman doon is for example, I have Gift of Magi, yung mga ganun ba? Kaso lang, yung sa mga yung sa higher level grade 12, may na kami, Einstein. Einstein, yan? Di Einstein. Wait, yung ba? Yung monster, si Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Oo. Yun.
Intindihan ko pa yun eh. Ano ba yung tinuturuan mo? Is it high school or college? Or
high
just
school,
elementary?
grade 9 to grade 9 to grade 12.
Grade 12, okay.
Oo, ito yung ginagamit namin ipakit. Ano ba? Nakikita ba? Wait ha. Hindi ko alam.
Nawala na eh.
Teka muna.
Hindi ka na nakashare.
Ito yung ginagamit namin na book.
Okay. May illustration or 100% text?
May illustration siya actually. Every page may illustration siya. So nakikita nila. Kaya lang, pag binabasa nila, ang hirap nung mga words. Kasi parang original text yata yung ginagamit nila. Hindi graded.
Miss.
Oo, hindi siya graded. So ang ginawa nung isang native speaker ko na kasama, naghanap siya ng mga graded. Yun yung ginagawa niya sa mga estudyante niya. But ako, hindi ko ginawa yun. Ang ginawa ko, first is yung pre-reading, yung ina-unlock mo yung vocabulary, yung ni TG ba, yung GPU ni TG na ginawa natin. But before that, kasi nagturo na ako 1 year before ako tinuro ko na yung book na to 1 year before ako nag-UPOU. Gumawa ako nung reading circle group, the reading circle worksheet. Na first is you unlock the vocabulary, the key passages. So after noon, group discussion, reading by group, tsaka discussion, comprehension, yung mga ganun. Paunti-unti. Kaya yung 45 minutes na na sinasabi ko kanina na kailangan, as a teacher, kailangan nating yung time limit ng hindi namin, mostly natatapos namin na like totally comprehend the story 4 meetings. 4 meetings yun. To understand pa lang yun the story. Tapos after na nun, yun na yung mga enrichment activity, yung paggawain ko sila ng storyboard, nung mga pang anik-anik doon. So yun, maano talaga. Tapos nung ginawa ko, nagawa na nga yung readability na ina-analyze ko na yun, na-submit ko na. Kasi dapat, sabi nung sa ano natin, sa trends in reading na na subject, dapat daw, usually, you have to first do the readability before buying the book. Di ba may nangyayari pa yung na ganyan-ganyan, yung book, kung tama ba? Syempre, I don't know, syempre negosyo din, siguro. Binili na nila yung book, tapos pinagawa na ako ng ng curriculum, tapos in-implement na agad, tapos doon pa naman ng mga teacher na, oh my God, this book is a very high vocabulary words that does not fit to the of the level of the students. Yung parang ganon yung nangyari. So ang ginawa ko, syempre ako yung coordinator. Gumawa ako ng maraming worksheet na tapos ako yung binibigay ko yun sa mga mga teacher, kung ano man yung kung sabi ko naman, hindi naman lahat yan you have to do. Kung ano lang yung gusto niyo gawin. O yung applicable sa klase niyo, na komportable kayong gawin, yung mga ganun. Kaya minsan stress ako kasi ang dami siya, lalo pa yung mga mga hindi natin kalahi. Ang dami nilang reklamo. So anyways, yun yung experience ko sa readability na yan. How about you?
Okay, I want to share mine. Like I said, when I was in high school, our teacher gave us a menu. So she gave us several titles like Frankenstein, Dracula, Romeo and Juliet, Merchant of Venice. When I first tried Merchant of Venice, it's Old English. So in one sentence, I would have to look up every other word. So my goodness. So I switched to the one I like. Yeah, I heard about Frankenstein. Hey, that sounds cool. So Frankenstein. At least Frankenstein, I was able to understand most of the words. Maybe it's modernized. I don't know. But the one I chose is not very thick. It's pocketbook size, like this, 500 pages only. So I think the original is a lot bigger and longer. So maybe it's watered down. Our teacher also told us to count. Hindi ko alam na may pala yun, readability formula pala. So she told us to count the syllables, ganyan. During that time kasi, books are not sealed yet. You can open it in National Bookstore, go there and then look at it and then count. And naiintindihan ko na ngayon kung bakit yung iba nagbabasa nando sa National Bookstore, nagbabasa and then ibabalik sa nang hindi binibili. Parang hindi ko naisip yun Nakabasa ka na, nakalibre ka pa, may aircon pang libre.
Pero actually dito ang mga library open, sir. May mga students dito, I mean mga small kids or until 10 years old, 12, nagbabasa sa bookstore.
Baka pwede rin.
May reading doon, may reading corner.
May reading corner. Okay. Sa National Bookstore na napupuntahan ko kasi walang ganun. Tago-tago yung mga tao. Hindi ko nagigets. Saka ko lang nalaman na nung okay. Pati kaya pala may mga gwardiya umiikot kasi pati mga comic books binubuksan tapos binabasa, ibabalik ulit. So nakakalibre. So ayun, kayo naman. Share naman.
Applicable ba yung readability din, Maika, doon sa mga maliliit, Ria? Ginagamit nyo ba yun?
Yeah. Nahirapan nga kami nung Tanya when we analyzed a book kasi very few words. So I think we used the smug. Tama ba, Tanya?
The smug. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Tanya's still listening. Ano bang natin, Tanya?
I think yung
smug.
But yeah, I think it's smug.
Oo. It was difficult kasi very few words yung bibilangin namin. So we had to be very exact. And personally, I think for the kids, it's easier, as what you said kanina, to choose books for them. It would all depend on the storyteller. Kasi hindi pa sila talaga nagbabasa on their own . So a lot would depend on who would read to them. So kailangan animated ka, kailangan may props ka habang babasa sa kanila. Tapos you make it interactive bago ka mag-turn ng page. Dapat may i-ask ka muna na questions. Tapos gagawin mong sobrang suspenseful yung pagbabasa mo kahit na very simple lang naman yung story. So, artihan mo lang siya. Have to be very creative, very animated.
Can you give us an example? No, because I have never tried it before.
Magbasa sa mga bata?
Yeah. Never did.
So for example, you're reading Three Billy Goats Gruff. Are you familiar with the book? Yung three goats kasi, they live in this certain part of the field. Tapos sobrang takaw na nila, naubos na nila yung lahat ng grass. So they wanted to go to the other side of the bridge kasi doon puno pa yung
grass.
Oo. Pero ang problem, may troll doon sa bridge. Nakatira siya sa under the bridge. So, pag mag-story ka sa mga bata, para ma-imagine na itsura ng troll, kung meron kang props, paglalagay ka pa ng wig, gano'n. Tapos parang,
talaga?
Big bad. Oo, gaganon ka talaga. Pati yung voice mo, babaguhin mo. Para ka talaga artista. Pag magtuturo ka sa maliliit na bata, sila naman parang, nakaganyan lahat sila sa'yo. Kasi,
gusto kong gusto kong gawin yan.
Parang sila nanonood siguro. Feeling ko, yun nangyari sa kanila na parang they're watching a film, tapos excited sila malaman yung what will happen in the next page. So, pag nakikita ko na ganun yung mukha nila, sabi ko, ay, okay, success. Kasi lahat sila tahimik, lahat sila nag-aantay kung ano yung susunod na sasabihin mo, susunod na mangyayari. Well, in fact, very simple lang naman. So, talagang, itong readability ng text, at least for me, personally, hindi ko pa makita yung significance niya sa tinuturuan ko. Kasi I think, depende pa sa teacher. This is my personal take on it, Kasi hindi pa nga sila nagbabasa on their own. So, it depends sa teacher, which is very crucial to make them invested in reading kaagad. Kasi baka hindi mo na kailanganin yung readability na to. Kasi when they start early, kasi sabi nga ng Matthew effects, the more you read, the more you know. Kahit na yung text na to, pang grade 6 pa, kung ikaw maaga ka nagbasa, magiging madali na kaagad sa'yo Kasi parang nadaanan mo na siya kaagad. So, yung naiisip ko about it. If we start them really young, parang half the battle is already won. Talking about libraries, it's also one of my dreams na dito sa Philippines, sana magkaroon tayo ng public libraries kasi sobrang maraming masusolusyonan ng mga problema kung may mga libraries siguro tayo dito sa Philippines na open for everybody. Kaya lang, yun, saan makukuha yung funding? So yan, that's my take on it.
Nakangiti si Sir Kevin. Nakangiti mo kami sasabihin si Sir.
Yeah, I would just like to add on the yung sinabi ni Ma'am Ria. I'll go back with the readability issue later on, but I just want to support Ma'am Ria on that, especially the library kasi ito yung let's go back to the main point of our where we're taking the MLLE exam. It's because we want to help our students improve their literacy, diba? So, sinabi ni Krashen, one of his webinars, sinabi niya na libraries are very helpful kasi dun yung main source of narrative text na binabasa ng mga bata, which would really help them understand the expository text that they will be reading in school. So, the foundation, sabi ni Krashen, the foundation daw yung comprehensive input. I don't know if you talked na already about Krashen, but according kay Krashen, yung mga storybooks is the comprehensible input sa mga bata. And then the more that they progress into the kind of storybooks that they are reading, that's the I+1.
Yeah.
Diba? So, that's why open libraries are very important kasi dito sa Cebu may library naman na open 24/7. Kaso lang it's not for kids, or they only allocated a small portion of it for the kids. Like, it's a book nook, may mga books, and then of course sa restrictions dito sa Philippines, it's really closed for the students. So hopefully we will have talaga a library for those children who do not have that opportunity for a text rich environment.
Yes.
So yun, I would just like to add yun talaga sa sinabi ni Krashen na these libraries or these storybooks are very important for the children, because if they do not have, or if they do not read enough storybooks, they won't have that kind of a uh, foundational knowledge of the structures na later on when they go to school, they will not anymore understand the academic text or the expository text that they will be reading, because they don't have an enough foundation sa narrative text. So, yun lang po. And then, yung sa readability, naman, I would just like to share, ito yung one, yung project namin as a group, yung research namin, or hindi talaga research, I think yung mini case study or mini thesis, it's about science content area reading. So kinumpare namin yung what they call this, yung how the students would like to read science books, and then we found out that the structure of science books are very, of course, because it's science, it's expository talaga. But then the students don't have that background knowledge on the narrative part, on the narrative structure. So if you remove that foundation, wala talaga. The students will just be reading like words that are floating in their minds.
That's true.
Yan lang po.
Thank you. Anybody else?
May I share po?
Yes, go ahead, Micah.
So sa readability po, ang experience ko naman dyan, it's usually a headache. Kasi,
Headache
kasi
talaga.
nga po, as you know, yung mga students ko, may disability po sila.
ganun ba?
Yes.
So, tas marami sa kanila, as I said before, limited po talaga yung special schools dito. So usually, tatanggapin lang sila sa regular school. Tapos, kung ano man yung binibigay sa classmates nila, that's the same material they're going to get. Pero as it is, for example po, meron akong student na she's in grade 4. So, you would expect na yung literature na ibibigay sa kanila is also for grade 4. Ngayon, ang ginagawa po kasi ng mga parents, sinisend nila sa akin yung mga lessons from school para ma-identify ko saan ko matutulungan yung bata. So, included doon yung literature na binabasa nila sa school. So, the first thing I do is, kasi sinasabi ko sa parents, halimbawa, ang reading age ng anak mo is 8 years old. Tapos, ang reading material is for a 14-year-old. Sobrang laki ng difference. That's a 6-year difference. So, hindi ko matutulungan yung bata to jump from 8 years old to 14 years old agad. I can do it na 8, tapos pa 9, papuntang 10. So, kaya pag may dumating sa akin na literature from school, ginagamitan ko agad siya ng readability. And then, I kid you not, 0% of it is at the proper level for the grade.
Wow.
0%. I've never encountered a literature that was given from school that is appropriate for the age of the child. So,
Alain mo yun. Inappropriate yung binasa ko.
Kaya nagtataka rin ako, paano yung mga kaklase niya? Kasi yung student ko, understood na yon. She has a disability. So, of course, may hirapan siya. Pero even you, as a regular 10-year-old, bigyan ka ng reading material for a 14-year-old.
True.
Grabe talaga. Tapos, yung isang novel pa, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Ang title is Island of the Blue Dolphins. Meron dong, merong murder, merong massacre, merong natural
For a 10-year-old?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, murder!
Yes. Mm-mm.
Massacre!
Like, isang buong tribe sila na minasacre. Oo, tapos
Ano title again? Ano title? Sorry.
Island of the Island of the
Ano
Blue
ko yun?
Dolphins.
Island of the Blue
Blue
Dolphins. Okay.
Dolphins, oo. Tapos, grabe talaga siya. So, nung tinulungan ko yung estudyante ko to read it, ang sabi ng estudyante ko, I feel depressed. This is so depressing. So, bukod sa readability, ang question ko is, how are the children being supported psychologically to prepare them for this kind of text?
Correct.
So did you prepare them beforehand? And then, did you debrief afterwards? Chinek niyo ba kung naintindihan at kamusta yung emotional situation ng mga bata pagkatapos mo pagdaanang basahin yung ganong mga klase ng bagay?
Oo.
So yun po, kaya yung readability for me, it's very important as a therapist kasi na-identify ko whether I need to provide recommendations sa school na pwede po ba napakitulungan siya or pwede po ba napakidalian yung homework, yung ganito. Kasi ano talaga, like what do you expect? Like wala talaga, sobrang walang support. So yeah, in that way, yun dahilan kaya headache ko.
Pero do they adjust naman, Micah?
Hindi po sila nag-a-adjust. Hindi
What? Grabe.
Ilang taon ko na po tina-try na makiusap na pakibago yung text, please. Ganito po yung babasahin niya. Hindi po sila pumapayag. So, sabi ko na lang, okay. So, ito yung module, ito lahat ng kailangan sagutan. Pwede po ba na part 1 lang yung sasagutan niya? Hindi pa rin pwede.
Oh my gosh.
So, ang tangi po nangyayari sa amin, usually, merong tutor yung bata at tutor yung sumasagot para sa bata. So, ano natutunan ng bata? So, ang sayang po na merong readability tests tapos hindi nagagamit sa schools.
As in, yun nga yung sinasabi ko, ano yun business
Yes.
Pirma sila ng ano dun Kaya lang, if business na naman yun, yeah, they still have to use those, no? Kasi they are school is an education, but a business, but it is also an education that you have to apply na lang, 'di ba? All those na necessary to have an institution para iha ka ng as a siguro may-ari ng school, you should two birds in one stone, yung business and education na andun na yung ano. So ewan ko, I hope maano nila yun kasi nahihirapan talaga both ang mga bata at ang teacher. Kasi syempre, ano na yun sa atin, yung double ano na yun, yung parang trabaho ba? Double na trabaho na sa atin yun, yung mabigat kasi nga mag-ano pa tayo, you have to make another worksheets na naman to break down all those parts na kailangan nating gamitin sa klase. Kaya sige, tapusin na natin tong last na lang. It will have a connection with our topic. It's the last factor is, can you guess? Charot. Can you guess the last factor?
Can I call a friend?
Yes, go ahead. Actually, it is the where is it? This one, the reading teacher. Diba? Ito yung factor na very important talaga, as what you mentioned earlier, we are the ones who will break it down. Kung mahirap, gagawa tayo on how for it to be simplified. Yung mga math teacher, di ba ginagawa nila yun na ang hirap-hirap ng equation, tapos tinuturo nila sa atin, bini-breakdown nila and give us the simplified equation. Yung mga ganon. So, ito din yung ginagamit ng mga reading teachers. So, as a reading teacher daw, we, according to, anong pagbasa nito? Dwyer. Oh,
yun na yun.
Yun
na yun, Dwyer. Tama o mali, okay na yun.
Oh, yes. Basta 1993. Ito yung may limang Dapat first is you have to set a high expectations of students and of yourself as a teacher. Warm and caring attitude, teaching focused on needs of students rather than on specific content. Highly flexible, enthusiastic, and imaginative instruction. Like like Teacher Ria and Micah, they are to animate things, and high levels of personal comfort during interactions with students. So yun. I have here the Pygmalion effect.
The Pygmalion effect.
I'm sure you are familiar with this one, but we will watch. What is this?
Sprout.
Wait. Sana yun. Ayan.
Galing sa Sprout.
Pygmalion.
Sprout yan, YouTube channel ng Sprout.
Oo. Sana yun? Ayan na.
The Pygmalion effect is the phenomenon whereby higher expectations lead to higher performance. It can be best understood by a circle where our beliefs about another person's abilities influence our actions toward the other person. This action has an impact on the other's beliefs about themselves. The beliefs about themselves cause the other's actions toward us, which again reinforce our beliefs about that person. And so on and on and on. Let's look at an example and start with your beliefs. Imagine you are the coach of a basketball team, and you observe your team on the first day. Chris and Joe are new members of your team. Chris reminds you of a famous player. Joe reminds you of an annoying boy from your high school year. Unconsciously, you decide what to expect of each one of them. Your beliefs influence your actions. When Chris enters the court, you are happy to see him. When he plays, you push him to do better, practice harder, stay an extra hour. If he makes a mistake, you explain to him how to improve. When Joe comes in, you hardly notice him. You're glad to see him score, but you don't give him much feedback and don't invest extra time in his training. When Joe does a mistake, you are a little annoyed. Your actions impact their beliefs about themselves. Chris feels you appreciate him, and he appreciates you in return. He believes in his own success. Joe feels you have little patience and appreciation for him. He does not believe in his own success. Their beliefs about themselves causes their actions toward you. Chris finds more and more joy in playing, and he never misses a training session. During the games, he gives 100% all the time. Joe finds less joy in playing than before and doesn't give his full effort in the games. He starts to miss the training sessions sometimes, which reinforces your beliefs about them. You see how Chris enjoys playing, how he trains hard and shows a fast increase in his performance. Joe seems not to be very motivated. His skills don't increase as much, and he starts to show up less. You knew it right away. Thank God your instincts were right. The Pygmalion effect is also known as the Rosenthal experiment, named after a research of Robert Rosenthal at Harvard. In a first study, he challenged test subjects to coach rats through a maze. Half the group were told their rats were extremely intelligent and specifically trained. The other half were told that their rats were dumb. In fact, the rats were all the same. During the experiment, however, the smart rats performed well better than the dumb ones. This showed how the expectations of the coaches influenced even the performance of rats. Rosenthal then did the Pygmalion in school study together with Lenore Jacobson. At the beginning of the school year, a group of elementary school teachers were told that some of their new pupils had extraordinary talent and potential. This information, which was completely made up, was given about random average students in each class. All students had done the IQ test in advance. By the end of the year, the students that were described as more talented had significantly increased their performance in the IQ test compared to the rest of the class. Robert Rosenthal concluded, "When we expect certain behaviors of others, we are likely to act in ways that make the expected behavior more likely to occur." What do you think about this theory? And if you believe it, is there a way to prevent ourselves from being shaped by others in a negative way?
If you like this video and the way we explain the subject, subscribe to our channel. We try to explain complex subjects in simple language and cartoons to support students all around the world
Where
in their
is it?
learning. If you want to support us, you can go to
There you go.
www.patreon.com/sprout. The
Ayan.
Pygmalion effect
Eh,
is the
sana yun? Ayun. So, yun yung Pygmalion effect na sinasabi kanina ni Dwyer. Okay? So, ito yung Pygmalion effect na sinasabi kasi ang gumawa pala ng natin psychology in reading. Yun yung sinasabi ko ginawa ni Dr. Hermosa, ni Professor Hermosa. So, ang sabi niya doon, there are two kinds of teacher that we can be. First one is the teacher as a scholar. So, as a teacher, we have to also ask ourselves, do we have the competencies to empower our students? So, being a scholar, this is what we should do. Ito naman another video.
On April 19th, 1995, MacArthur Wheeler robbed a bank with his face glazed with lemon juice, believing the juice would make his face invisible to the surveillance cameras. He thought so because lemon juice works as invisible ink on a piece of paper. Police broadcasted the security camera footage on the local 11 o'clock news, and just after midnight, Arthur was arrested. Incredulously, he said, "But I wore the juice." Baffled by this reasoning, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, two psychologists, studied Mr. Wheeler and others like him. They came to the conclusion that people with low ability at a task tend to, paradoxically, overestimate themselves. This cognitive bias is known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Let's look at this graphically, plotting one's confidence in your ability against one's actual knowledge in a field. As we learn something new, we are often highly confident because we know so little that as soon as we know a tiny bit, we think we know it all. Those who stop learning here maintain a false sense of mastery. Those who continue learning realize things are more complex and often lose motivation. And the more they increase their knowledge, the lower their confidence becomes. Many stop at this stage, thinking they've learned nothing. Only if we keep going can we regain confidence while getting better. And at the end, we will be full of knowledge and almost as confident in our ability as right after we started. In other words, if a simpleton, a good student, and a wise teacher were to have a public debate, this is how things could go down. The simpleton knows just a little bit, but is very confident and voices his opinions loud and without hesitations. The student knows more, but doesn't realize it because she lacks confidence. She keeps quiet. The teacher is confident, but understands how complex things really are. Hence, voices his opinions with reservations. In the end, the simpleton wins the popular vote because he is so confident about being right, and people tend to trust certainty. Research from North America, Europe, and Japan suggests that culture plays a big role. From assessments of one's own ability to drive, we know that 93% of Americans think they are better drivers than average, while only 69% of Swedish think so. In Japan, on the other hand, people in general tend to underestimate their abilities as a strategy to see their underachievement as an opportunity to improve. Setting out on a journey of learning can be a daunting experience. What starts off as a leisurely stroll soon changes into an intense battle of willpower between you and an intimidating amount of knowledge. Do not give up. The longer you fight, the more power you gain, up until the point you win. And in the end, if you persevere, you may be elevated to the ranks of Socrates, who over 2,000 years ago left us with a quote of wisdom. I know that I am intelligent, because I know that I know nothing.
All right. So I'm sure you can relate all this, diba? Congratulations, teachers, because sabi nga ni Dr. Hermosa, I will borrow her quote there. Sabi niya, congratulations because you are right here, right now, studying. That means you are on your way to become Socrates.
Socrates.
Diba? So yeah, let's continue. Yun yung sabi ni talaga ni ni Hermosa na congratulations daw sa atin kasi nga nandito tayo ngayon to unlock whatever it is that it should be unlocked for our students, of course. So we should have the spirit of a teacher. There are a lot of I think kinuha ko to sa ibang hindi ko lang nasulat yung pangalan niya, but sabi niya shows the attitude of the pupil in his daily work. So when you are cheerful, your students also is cheerful. And if you are, palagi lang galit, palagi lang, nagre-reflect yon sa di ba sa surroundings mo, tama naman yun. Pag yung pinapakita mo sa kanila, yun yung, for example, kung parati mo silang pinapagalitan, so nadidepress na sila, so parati silang takot sa iyo. But then if you are always cheerful, of course, nakikita yun sa mga students mo. And then this is the very important one according to nakuha natin yun sa Dunning-Kruger. Sabi niya sabi nung isang resource ko, sabi niya the minimum of your knowledge of the subject without review will probably be the pupil's maximum after study. So that's the reason why as teachers we should always find ways and to know our subject matter. So that's being a scholar, and the teacher as romanticist. Bilisan ko na to kasi malapit na. The processing the wisdom that ensures her students' use of reading as a means of personal and societal development. So a teacher, a romanticist teacher must immersed in all different kinds of literary forms. There are different kinds of literary forms, di ba? Non-fiction, fiction, drama, poetry. So as a reading teacher daw, we have to know all these things. We have to immerse ourselves with that. And then being literate exemplars. What is this? Like we know the technicalities, the literary terms and concepts of literature, so that we can also have the liberty, personal liberty and intellectual freedom. And then when we have that, we can also encourage our students to be magiging din sila tawag nito intellect. They also have their intellectual freedom. Kasi ako dito na may experience kasi ako nito in my students right now. Kasi yung ginagawa kasi ng Vietnamese literature nila is wala silang intellectual freedom at saka personal liberty kasi ang one of the major subjects kasi nila take in the national exam is the tawag nito literature. And then yung teacher nila kung ano yung analysis ng author, analysis ng another author sa literary piece, dapat yun yung isusulat nila. Oo. So, parang na-limit yung, tapos they have to memorize it. So, that's why when English literature comes in their class, they have the prejudice na this subject is boring, like totally boring. Ganon yung talagang I always have a really hard times. It was really a challenging time before because yun yung nila, paano mo maibabalik yung interest nila sa literature na it's fun, it's exciting, it's interesting. If nandoon na yung nila, pag wala silang personal liberty and intellectual freedom to analyze different kinds of texts. 'Di ba? Kaya as a literary teacher, meron tayo daw ganitong skill. And then the next one is understanding and acceptance of why students communicate as they do. So this is very important because as you know, as what I've mentioned before in our class, in one of our reviews, my students can understand maybe, but they cannot speak clearly on how they understood it. Diba? So we don't really need to force them to say something that they can't and write something that they also can't. You have to also know that one. And then enlighten students. It is a quote I found from Google, from Robert John Meehan. Every ounce of effort we put into our children today will someday be measured and accounted for in our children's future. So you have to enlighten our students that this is not for us, no, as teachers. It's also for their future. And the last one is the greatest gift the teacher can give, is the unbridled romantic love affair with language and books, a gift that shall remain long after the sweet, gentle memories of school have dimmed and faded forevermore. This is where I remember Teacher Ria said, when you give a book, diba? Ano sabi niya, when you give a book, this is the gift that is always giving, yung sabi niya last time. And then lastly, a positive teacher is one who creates within his or her classroom. That's the teacher spirit earlier. Is realistic but always looking for the best in his or her students. Is competent. So that's why we need to learn more so that our maximum, the more knowledge that we have, also the students also can learn more from us, and realizes that positive expectations coupled with high level of teaching ability promotes maximum achievement from students. Here's to positive teachers everywhere. May their pride increase. Cheers, everyone. Okay, so I think that's the end of my presentation. Sorry, it's time already. So ano yung masasabi nyo sa teachers like us, Charot? Maika, ikaw nang mauna kasi ikaw yung pinaka nag-react dyan.
Yeah, I guess this is really important to be a positive teacher. Ako, honestly, kasi 11 years na ako na speech pathologist. Yung first 5 years ko, nasa Philippines ako. And then, I was actually more interested in my friends in the Philippines. So, hindi ako masyadong, itong mga stuff na to, being competent, high level of teaching, medyo wala yan sa akin before. I was nice, pero I was not the best teacher. Tapos when I got here, yung nakita niyo na roommate ko, I think last week, occupational therapist siya and sobrang sipag niya. So when I got here, sa kanya ako natuto how to be a positive teacher. So natuto ako how to love my job and my students more than anything else. So eto, I could really attest to this na marami akong students who bite me, who hit me, who spit on me. Like isipin mo na lahat ng ng physical. Yeah. Yung worst experience ko ay sinuntok ako sa ilong and then nagdugo yung ilong ko. So that's very normal sa sa profession ko. Pero pag wala kayong spirit ng teacher na number one, naiintindihan mo yung individualism ng student mo, and then iintindihan mo yung needs niya and yung responsibility mo as a teacher, it'll be very hard for you to go back to work the next day after experiencing that. Pero, yun nga, if you are a positive teacher and you believe na matutulungan mo yung bata, that's enough motivation for you to go back and try again.
Wow.
Yes, it's very Sir Kim, parinig naman ang mo, sharing mo dyan.
Hello po. As to this, about this po, yung being a positive teacher, actually, I could relate this one doon sa application, di ba? Pag-apply natin ng diploma program, pinagawa din tayo ng essay. Tapos same with our admission application sa masters, pinagawa din tayo. At first, actually, honestly, doon sa diploma program ko, ang nilagay ko talaga doon, I will take the diploma program because I want to increase my market value as a teacher. Diba? We all look forward to promotion, being accepted sa field, lalo na everyone was like rushing because when I applied for diploma program, kaka-graduate ko lang talaga, like after graduation, apply ka agad ako ng OU. Tapos mga ilang buwan
kayo ni Sir Kevin.
Talaga? Ilang taon ka pa lang, sir?
Parang kami ni Ma'am Aika ang kasing edad when we entered. Kami yung kabatch sa 202. 24 po ako ngayon. Kaka-24
Oh.
ko lang.
Oh my God, I feel
Oo.
old.
Bali yung paglabas ko talaga ng undergrad, apply kaagad ako ng OU. Tapos, yun talaga yung nasa isip ko. I will take this program because I want to increase my market value. In the Philippines, napakalaking big hit kapag yung pangalan ng school ganito, kapag yung degree mo ganito, ganyan. Meron kang ganitong degree.
Pag-graduate
So
ka
that
na,
was what I
dumdaw.
had when I graduated sa undergrad ko. Yun yung gusto ko, yung mag-increase yung market value ko as a teacher. But later on, nung nag-apply na ako sa master's na admission, yung sa admission letter ko, nilagay ko doon na it's not about my market value. Yung na-learn ko, hindi pala increasing my market value. It's about what should I do with my UP education. Alam mo yung ganun. Kasi ano yung, para saan yung pag-aaral mo? Really? Pang market value lang? yun yung naisip ko. Bakit nga ba ako nag-a-apply ng masters? Baka wrong yung motivation ko. Gusto ko lang palang ma-promote.
Higher motivation.
Di ba? Parang, ang pangit naman. Lahat naman siguro kahit mag-aral ka sa isang school, pwedeng ma-promote. So, yun yung naisip ko nung nilagay ko sa letter. Ang nilagay ko talaga doon, honestly, I want to implement a community literacy program because I was teaching senior high school. Wala na pala ako, hindi pa ako nagtuturo ngayon ulit. So, I was teaching senior high school and my background, yung first job ko talaga right after graduation, program coordinator ako sa DOLE, Department of Labor and Employment. Yun yung pinakauna. Hindi kaagad ako nagturo kasi magtitake pa ng board exam. So, habang nagwi-wait, nag-coordinator ako dun sa DOLE. Tapos, yung job ko dun, yung primary job ko was to bridge community at yung employment. Tapos, yung scope ko, Surigao del Norte, Surigao del Sur, I think you heard those provinces. Agusan del Norte, Agusan del Sur. Mostly, doon sa mga communities na yon, all they have in mind was, kung marunong ako magbasa, magkakapera ba ako? yun yung thinking ng isang adult eh. Bakit? Kung magbabasa ba ako, magkakapera ako? Kasi, kunyari, sasabihin mo sa kanila, merong ganitong program na tuturuan kayo paano i-market yung mga products nyo. Tapos, tatanungin nila, hindi naman kami marunong magbasa, paano pa kaya mag-market, di ba? So, babalik ka dun sa basic na kailangan mo silang turuan. Tapos, tatanungin nila, paano kami magkakapera dyan? So, yun yung isang challenge ko, yung naisip ko dun sa, siguro kung magma-masters ako at makukuha ko yung master's degree ko, matututo ako paano gawin yung tama, yung community literacy program. Kasi, ang nasa thinking ko lang, parang plan lang, action plan, pero parang mali. Parang gusto ko pang matuto paano gawin. Kasi dito sa local community namin, hindi talaga priority yung sa community literacy. Mostly, nasa agriculture, nasa gano'n na mga aspects, di ba?
Sounds familiar.
Oo, nasa ganun. Kasi malaki yung hatak doon sa doon sa taxes yung agriculture, yung gano'n. So, they put less premium doon sa community literacy kasi hindi naman nabibigay lahat ng school ng ALS education, ng alternative learning system. So, parang gusto ko yun yung nasa isip ko na pag matatapos ako dito sa masters ko, siguro gusto ko makatulong, give back to the community kung saan ako lumaki. Ganun.
Give where you live.
Diba? Yeah. Yun po.
Yun yung
May nanalo na.
Oo nga. Diba? Very noble naman yung mga natin as a teacher. Tama talaga, sir. Tama yun. Yung first na iniisip natin is promotion, malaki ang sweldo. But then, along the way, nalilearn natin na it's not all about that pala. It's part of, but it's not only all about that. Diba, Sir John?
Amayin na natin yung promotion. Isa sa mga reasons yun.
Yes, but it's only part of for now. Kasi nga, ano na tayo, nasa ano na tayo, higher ano na tayo ng ano ni Dunning-Kruger effect, o, 'di ba? Nandoon na tayo sa malapit na tayo doon sa last bubble. At saka malapit na tayo maging Socrates. Kailan pa yun? Na mga I know nothing na tayo. Ganon. And ikaw, sir, go.
Bale, ako naman yung aminado ako, mayabang ako dati. So after I graduated from my university, I was so confident I can speak English, blah blah blah. And then nung naka-encounter ako ng native English speaker, I told you guys, he told me directly, you sound like a Mexican immigrant. So parang okay. So doon na ako so I thought I need to grow, I need to educate myself, I need to improve. So ayun nga, nag-PTC ako, ito yung ginawa natin, DLLE, and then moving towards MLLE. It's a humbling effect when you see yourself from a different view. So ayun nga, parang nung kaka-graduate ko lang, I thought I know everything. So now na nag-i-study na tayo, natapos na natin yung DLLE 1 hanggang 7, na-realize ko na yung alam ko, ganito lang pala, kakarampot lang. So, parang nakakadurog din ng damdamin. Yeah, seriously. So, one more thing. When I was in high school, my major is computer science. So, when I was in high school, we started our studying computer. So, that's when I decided to take computer science. Pero nung naging professional ako, I concentrated on English because that's what I'm good at, I think. So right now I'm teaching computers again. And then I realized what I'm teaching now, I learned when I was in university. So oh my God. So yeah. So parang paurong ng paurong. Lalo na sa Bangkok, somewhere sa mga big cities, they are teaching right now I'm teaching this to high school students, and then I found that in somewhere in Bangkok, in Phuket, in big cities, they are already teaching this to elementary students. So parang what I know is like this.
Malapit ka na maging Socrates, sir. So, I know nothing.
Yeah. I feel like the Terminator. I'm old, but not obsolete. Yeah. I'm almost obsolete. So, that's it.
Totoo yan, sir. I affirm you with that. Ganon din ako nung gumalit ako ng high school. Kasi nung high school ako, nasa debating team. So, feeling ko, ang galing-galing ko na mag-English. Kasi, sa province namin, may debating team, top 2 speaker. Oh, ganon. So, feeling ko, ang galing-galing ko, di ba? Tapos, nung nag-college na ako, so, feeling ko, ang galing-galing ko, mas magaling pa ako sa inyo. Ganon yung, isip ko. Yes, di ba? Tapos, yung sabi kanina, si Simpleton, I'm the Miss Simpleton, di ba? Yung mga ganon, yung feeling mo, ang yabang-yabang mo na kasi ang dami mong alam. Tapos, nung nag-college ako, syempre, ganon pa rin yung mentality ko. So, sabi ko, ayoko nang mag-attend sa mga activities ng high school, ng mga university na yan, kasi napagdaanan ko na yan lahat. Ganon ako. Ganon ako kabibo. Tapos, nung graduate ako ng college, nag-offer sa akin yung school na doon ako magturo. IT kasi ang ginajutan ko, di ba? Sabi ko, ang galing-galing ko talaga, may job offer ako. Pero, nung pumunta ako sa Cebu, Jansen ako, nung pumunta ako sa Cebu, nag-apply ako sa call center. Sinabihan ba naman ako na, your English is so provincial.
Ouch!
Ala, sabi ko, naiyak ako. Sabi ko, akala ko ang galing-galing ko na. Tapos, ayun, after noon, April, ako graduate, then nag-apply ako April, May. Hindi talaga ako natanggap sa lahat ng call center na pinag-applyan ko, sir. Kasi my English is so provincial. And they like American accent. Ganon. So, hindi na ako nag-apply kasi na-disheartened talaga. Totoo.
I know the feeling.
Sir.
I know the feeling.
Hay nako, sabi ko, ang bobo-bobo ko pala. Oh my God, ang laki-laki na expectation ng family ko, pero ang bobo-bobo ko, wala akong trabaho. Tapos, come August, wala pa rin akong trabaho, sir. Imagine that. Sabi nung sinabi na nung ko na mag-apply daw ako ng ESL. Sabi ko, hindi nga ako natanggap sa call center, magti-teach pa ako ng English. How come? Sabi ko. Yung friend ko naman, feeling niya ang galing-galing ko talaga. Siya ang nag-apply sa ESL sa akin. Sinend niya, sabi niya, "Te, pasend nga ng CV mo, te." Sabi niya, sinend ko sa kanya. Sinend niya doon, hala, December, sir. So imagine mo, December pa ako naka-apply natanggap. December ako natanggap, nag-training ako. Until, nung pag nagturo na ako sa ESL, sabi ko, hala, wala talaga akong alam nito. Kaya, I decided to take diploma in professional education. Doon na yung nag-start yung journey ko to become a teacher. Kasi feeling ko talaga ang bobo-bobo ko. Tapos yun, hanggang sa nag-diploma in na ako, nito tayo, diba? Medyo bobo pa rin ako, pero may konti ng alam. Yun yung as a teacher naman, sa teacher side, the more I learn sa learning style at saka learning difficulties nung estudyante ko, doon ako parang na-encourage ba, na-challenge how to make this easier for them. Kaya dami kong ginawang worksheets, madami akong mga lesson plan na ginagawa, sa higher level at saka mapa-lower level man siya, ginagawa ko yun para ma-cater yung needs nila ba. Tsaka hindi na ako masyadong strict ngayon sa like yung recitation, yung sa language, at saka hindi na ako palaging galit ngayon kasi sabi nga nung oo, dati kasi palagi akong galit, bakit hindi siya nagsa-study, sinabi ko na mag-study ka, ganun. Hindi na ako ang ganung teacher, tsaka hindi na ako nagpapagawa ng assignment, ng homework. Gusto ko lahat ginagawa siya sa klase para nakikita ko yung nila, yung gawa nila, tsaka yung progress nila. Kaya yun, at least I improve. Thank you so much. Yun lang.
Anong oras na? 21:20?
10:20.
10:20 na.
Delay tayo. Sir Kim, thank you so much for coming. Next Wednesday. Sino? Sa next Wednesday, hindi tayo nakapag-assign.
Salamat po. Salamat.
Si Sir Kim na lang yung
Pag-usapan na lang po natin sa chat, I think.
Sige. Sir Kim, maghanda ka kasi ikaw na yung namin.
No, seriously, Sir Kim.
Hindi
Kahit
po
dalawang
ako
topic lang.
Okay lang yun, sir. Basta pag-usapan natin sa group chat kasi
Don't worry, sir.
overtime. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something. Upload ko yung natin. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Teka lang. Wait.